on, get in!
Yeah, you did. There you go. Let's try this a second time. This is take 2, ladies and gentlemen, because I don't. Somebody didn't press record the first time. So, what are we doing today, Zach?
I messed up.
It's okay. It's okay, Sonny. We all mess up from time to time.
Yeah, remember when I got arrested my second day of college? Like, that was a mess up.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
On to today's episode. So, Dad, let's jump right in. We are going to be talking about the things that frustrate car people the most. I remember you coming home and sharing stories. Okay, first off, I remember you coming home just stupid late because people would never leave the dealership. I also remember stories about kids running around through cars. I also remember you sharing frustrations around people that didn't recognize that the offer from the other dealership was completely BS and bogus, and it was just to get them to leave your dealership to go to the other dealership. So I'm wondering,
yes,
if you can just enlighten us, as car buyers, what do we do that really frustrates and pisses off, people working at a car dealership?
Well, the biggest thing is that dealerships, on average, are open anywhere from 11 to 12 hours scheduled per day.
Yeah.
Most are scheduled 9 to 9, 9 in the morning till 9 at night, what I call a half a day, because it's only 12 of the 24 hours.
Yeah.
And most of the personnel that are there are scheduled for a vast majority of those 12 hours every day.
Yeah.
So the thing that frustrates people in the car business the most is, let's say you work at a dealership and you close at 9 o'clock and a customer wanders in at 8:45 and says they want to buy a car. It's great that they want to buy a car. The salespeople and the sales managers are excited at the prospect of selling a car. What doesn't excite them is the prospect of, I don't know, leaving somewhere around midnight so that they could go home and get a couple hours sleep before they have to be back at 9 in the morning to do this all over again. So recognize that if you go into a dealership late, 8:30, and you start the process, that most salespeople and most sales managers hate that, only because they've already spent 11 hours there or 12 hours there. They don't really want to make it a 14 or a 15-hour day.
Yeah.
So that's frustrating. One of the most frustrating things I ever saw, and I used to deal with it constantly, was when people would, a couple would come in with their children, small children, and just let their children run wild through the dealership.
Did you have someone like a kid just honking a horn?
Oh God, yeah. They'd honk horns,
in the showroom.
Oh yeah, and they'd climb through cars and they'd spill their drinks and and the parents wouldn't do anything to control them because I don't know, they thought it was like the playland at McDonald's or something, and it's not, because I don't know, at the Acura store, I guess the cheapest cars we sold were in around $30,000, and the most expensive were well over $100,000. So we didn't really appreciate kids using our vehicles as their playground, and we really didn't appreciate the parents deciding not to control or stop their children from doing any of this stuff. It's very frustrating when, as an adult in the room, you have to go, sorry folks, we have to get your kids under control, or we're just going to have to ask you to leave and come back without them. We don't want to have to do that, but there are other people in here looking at cars and trying to buy cars, and we kind of have to make it pleasant for everybody involved. So if you want to go into a dealership and you want to bring your children with you, that's great. Just make sure they're well behaved, and make sure that you're willing to put forth the effort to keep them in line. It's not the dealership's personnel's job to keep them in line, and it's certainly not their job to remind you that it's your job to keep your children under control. So that was very frustrating.
Yeah.
When I first started in the business, way back, with Barney Rubble and Fred Flintstone.
Back in the 70s.
Yeah, it seemed like it, yeah. We didn't have the opportunity for people to come in, buy the car, and drive it home the same day.
Really?
Yeah, because you just didn't have all the technology that you have today. I mean, so people would come in and they would negotiate a price. They'd give you a deposit to hold the car, $100 deposit, so that they could come back the next day. If they were financing the car, they would fill out a credit application, and then we literally would have to get on the phone and call the bank, and we would have a specific buyer assigned to us, and then we would have to read the credit application to the buyer, who would fill it in on his end, line by line, and then the bank would do what they needed to do, and hopefully we would get a response by the next day. Today, it's all, you throw it in the computer and you have a response in 10 or 15 minutes typically. So the customers would give us a $100 deposit to tie up the car. And then they would leave and they would go to another dealership and they'd get the deal that was $50 better. And they wouldn't call to tell you, or the next day when you expected them to show up, they wouldn't show up. Or better yet, this was my favorite, and I don't want anybody to be offended when I say this, but I'm going to explain the difference between Jewish customers and Italian customers. And Jews and Italians are really, really close. Families, everything about them is really, really close. And the difference from my experience in the Atlantic City area was, if you agreed to a number with your Jewish customer, the next day they would show up with a check for the exact amount that you agreed to. If you agreed to a number with your Italian customer, the next day they'd show up with a check that was $50 short, because they figured there was always another $50 they could get off. So that was the difference way back when. I don't know if it's still the same today.
Back in the 70s.
Back in the 70s, back in the day, back with Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble. So that was frustrating when you had everything, and then you had to start the negotiating process all over again.
I imagine that kind of still happens today, though, especially with people working deals, digitally.
Oh yeah,
so easy to just pick up the phone, call someone else, and honestly, that is the best technique to get the lowest price possible.
Yes, and sometimes, as one of our viewers suggested in a comment that I read this morning, if he would much rather find a salesperson that he could connect with than haggle necessarily over the price. If he didn't feel good about the salesperson, then he really wasn't going to feel good about the deal. And that's really what it always boiled down to, was just being able to figure out a way how to connect with the person you're trying to sell the car to. If you never make that connection on a human level, you're not making the sale. So I don't know. There were just there's any number of frustrating things. It was frustrating when somebody would come in and they'd want to take a test drive, except, well, I don't know, they didn't have a driver's license. Things like that are frustrating. I remember a specific incident at a Mazda Volkswagen store I worked in Arizona. And the customer said to me, he said, well, I have to sell some stock. And typically, stock, you call your broker, say, I need to sell some stock, and it takes usually 5 to 7 days.
This is like back in the 90s.
To sell your stock and then be able to get the money transferred to a different account. And so I said, well, what stock are you selling? And he goes, well, I have to sell a couple of my cows. And it was different stock, and I had no idea when the livestock sale was. But I kind of felt that was a tad frustrating. And, well, honestly, I was, being the city slicker that I am, having never seen a cow before. I just really cracked up and could not believe that he needed to sell a couple of his cows.
More power to him.
Yeah, but when you live in a ranching area, that could be the case.
So, for our audience, do you have any advice as they're going through the car buying process? Things that they should avoid doing. I mean, kids makes sense. Showing up super late makes sense. Putting deposits down and then going to other dealerships makes sense. But also from the car buyer perspective, do what you need to do to feel most comfortable. But any other words of advice in terms of what you should avoid doing and to not piss off
for me, it was always just be honest. Just be, if you're not going to buy the car, just say you're not going to buy the car.
Which is fine.
Yes. It's okay to say to the salesperson, you know what, after all we've gone through, I don't think this is the right car for me, as opposed to saying, well, let me discuss it with my wife. When discussing it with the wife was not even really what was holding you back. It was the fact you didn't like the car.
Yeah.
And you can say that because you will not, I can guarantee you, unless it's an absolutely green salesperson on their first day ever in the car business, you will not get a virgin when you say, I don't like the car.
Won't be the first time they've heard no.
No, and if it is the first time, it'll be the first of a lifetime's worth of no's that they're going to hear over the course of their career. So just be honest. If it turns out that after negotiating and driving it and everything else that you don't like it, just say you don't like it. You don't have to give another excuse. Just say you don't like it. And I know it's hard because most salespeople are not perceived as being honest. But if you start the conversation by being honest, if you start the conversation by saying, I don't know that this is going to be the car that I'm ultimately going to want, which is why I want to test drive it
Yep.
and see if I can fit it into my budget, just be honest. And I think most salespeople that I know would end up trying to be honest with you if you do that.
Yeah, no, makes plenty of sense.
So, just, I don't know, the truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
All right, Pops, thanks for your time like always.
My pleasure, Zach. Talk to you soon.